Prince. In celebration of the life of the late, great musical artist Prince, here is a personality analysis into the man behind the legend. Over 40 years of musical mastery, what was he really like? He had a reputation for being rebellious, hard to work with, introverted. Was he really? So the question I want to explore today is, did Prince live a life of pain and anguish or a life of joy and happiness? Let's take a look at her innermost fears through the lens of handwriting analysis. The first and most important trait of Prince as a human being has to be the big loop in his D. And if you look at the big loop in the D, you'll realize that this is the critical, most important fear and motivation in his life, and it has to do with his sensitivity to other people's criticisms. Anybody who's got a loop this big is both incredibly sensitive to the point of wanting to please everybody, to the point of really just wanting a compliment. It's basically a huge scar from childhood which says I wasn't approved of and I want to be approved. On the positive side, this type of fear is a huge motivator to do great things. There are successful people in the world that live wanting to please and wanting to do something so great they get feedback. And the downside to that is it is a defensive and it's an open wound. So when people get criticized with this trait, and when Prince got criticized, he became ugly. He became defensive. He thought people were talking about him. So that's the bad side of this trait if anybody has it big. Now, Prince had a very, very big loop most of the time. There are examples in here when he had very little loop. So that's probably his most obvious pain point in his life, is he lived for applause. He lived to get approval. And what's interesting is my observation, having been grew up in the 80s, is that he was reclusive. He didn't want attention. He didn't want necessarily people knowing about his life. But I think that was not because he's an introvert. I don't see a lot of introverted personalities. I think that's because he just didn't want the public view criticize him, because it would have been a lot of pain. I can't imagine what he went through when Facebook and all the social media came out to criticize him. Good thing that wasn't in the 80s, because he probably didn't have to hear a lot of it. Now, if we look at the cursive handwriting, we see a lot more rhythm, a lot more expression, but nothing about this is introverted. He is expressive. He is kind. He likes people. He's nurturing. This one almost has a feminine quality to it, because nurturing is a feminine trait, but it's still the sensitivity, and then he's got great self-esteem. One of the things I want to point out is most successful people cross their T-bars at the upper portion of the stem, but just positive, like he had confidence. The other aspects of confidence is this T-bar here that's persistence. Anytime someone doesn't pick up the pen, it's persistence. He finishes what he starts. And of course, his career, he grew up in Minnesota. He broke into the music scene at 17, 18 years old, and he had to persist, and he really was a profound influence on the music scene, as well as the culture all through the 80s and 90s. Now, his physical drives, he's very physical, very sensual, very sexual. He's got big open loops, which is very, very healthy. And if you look at his track record with women, you may think, oh my God, he's just dated so many beautiful women. Is there something wrong with him? Why didn't he get married and stay? Well, I think there's two reasons, and from my perspective, is if you look at this stroke here, this is what we call a stinger. A stinger is a subconscious desire to have a challenge and to have frustration in relationships. Now, no one wants frustration, but he likes the game. He likes the chase. He likes the unpredictability. In one of my books, I refer to this trait as a stinger, which is an unconscious anger at women, but I don't think it's really fair to call it an anger. I think it's more of an intermittent validation complex, meaning it's intermittent confirmation. So if he gets predictable love from one person, he's bored. If he gets completely unpredictable love, he's interested. So the series of marriages and series of relationships, I think he could go back to this desire to be challenged, this desire for like a condition of game, so he doesn't always know what to get because he doesn't get bored, and then the sensitive criticism. No one's ever said anything publicly bad about him that I'm aware of, but I don't follow him specifically. But I think being in a relationship with anybody with a loop this big makes you walk on eggshells, makes you wonder, oh my God, I hope it didn't hurt his feelings. And so that kind of pain can always result in defensive behavior. And like I said, the loop in the D can be both very positive, because he does great things to want approval, so he becomes excellent at it. He also is defensive. The other thing that you might know about Prince is that he was very dominant. He was the king of his castle. He was the boss on stage. And you'll look at the T-bars, they do go down, and that's called domineering or dominant, and even in the F it goes down. So these traits where they slant down means he wanted control and he wanted people to do their job. Again, not a bad thing. The result was 29 albums of amazing artistic behavior, because all his musicians did what they're told. They over-rehearsed. They learned 20 songs instead of 10 when he only played 10 because he wanted the flexibility. But I like the fact that he was domineering. I like the fact that these T-bars in this printing right here, where it says "Tapicize the face was Halloween," they're printed, but he still has T-bars really high. And so I think his self-esteem was good. He had a lot of pride and dignity, probably a little bit of vanity. It went back to him concerned about reputation. He very much cared about his appearance, about his looks, about how he came across. And if you look at this trait, this is another success trait of self-made millionaires, is the downstroked T. See how that goes below the baseline? That's called determination. We see it right here in the Y as well. That's a little independent. So I think that even though he was an extrovert, he needed his alone time. We see the straight down Y. So I think he's got 3 or 4 of the traits of what I consider successful people: determination, high self-esteem, persistence, and of course personal motivation, which is the desire to be loved. That is not always a good trait. It's usually a bad trait. And then I'll end with this right here. He had a circle I dot, but most people with a circle I dot is a huge desire to be creative and to be noticed for their creativity. Even people that are young and old, if they start writing circle I dot, they tend to find a creative expression, painting, music, etc. So in summary, in respect and celebration of a life worth living, this is Prince. A life of creativity, a life of expression, and a life of a little bit of pain, a pain of wanting to be loved and doing his best to help other people feel good about themselves and do something great and creative. Finally, I think the reason he's such a great performer is because he really got juiced with the applause. He really loved being loved. And as a little boy, he probably learned that performing gave him love, and he spent his whole life performing and doing great music and creating great experiences for people out of his need to be loved and, of course, his desire to create a wonderful musical expression. And that's an in-depth look at the mind of Prince. If you liked this and you want more in-depth personality profiles from handwriting, just subscribe and like this page or visit the newsletter at handwritinguniversity.com. I'm Bart Baggett. I'll see you next time.